Okay, Grim 15, let's knock out chapter 6. We're starting to actually get into some of the more interesting chapters, so hopefully you will agree with me and actually kind of start getting interested in the material that we're covering now. So police discretion and dilemmas. So these are the learning objectives. You can pause on this if you would like. I'm not going to spend time on that because we have more important things in the chapter to talk about, but discretion and discrimination. I'm fairly certain we all know what discrimination is, and that is when we are basically holding something against someone based on maybe their age, sex, gender, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, things like that. So this occurs when a discretionary decision maker treats a group or individual differently from others for no justifiable reason. So you can imagine that there are instances, and you may have been the victim of this at some point in your life, where you are treated differently because of maybe your sexual orientation, maybe because of your race, maybe because of your gender in and of itself, maybe because you're a man, maybe because you're a woman. Maybe because of your national origin, maybe because of your ethnicity, maybe because you're rich, maybe because you're poor, maybe because you're Muslim, maybe because you're Catholic, maybe because you're, who knows? But we've all seen it before. Most of us have experienced it before in one way or another. So police discretion is no different, and it is impacted, unfortunately, by discrimination as well. So there are different forms of discrimination, of course. I don't know if you can hear that. My dog is drinking so loud. Anyways, I'm sure they'll start barking. The phone will start ringing soon too, so I'm sorry. But I try to keep it quiet in the background. But there's forms of discrimination. Sometimes officers will enforce the law differently for different people. Is that reasonable? Are they going to do something different for an 80-year-old man than they would for maybe a 20-year-old man? I don't know. What do you think? If you're a police officer and you see an 80-year-old out doing something versus a 20-year-old out doing something, is your opinion of how to handle that particular person going to be different? I don't know. Withholding protection of the law, that's a problem. But officers could be more disrespectful to certain groups. They might use more force. In some instances, they might use racial profiling, and they might have a greater use of pretext stops, and that basically is, the whole driving while black stops, where officers will stop people. They'll come up with some random excuse, but basically be pulling the car over because the driver might be black, or so that's what it appears. So there are all kinds of discrimination. And does this stuff happen? You bet it happens. Does it still happen in 2021? Yeah, it happens. It happens every day. Do all officers do it? I hope not. But does it happen? Absolutely it does. There is a racial divide. The system of laws and punishment, the courts that administer the laws, and the correction system that make decisions regarding the liberties of those convicted have all been described as agencies that systematically and pervasively discriminate against minority groups. Now, as a white woman, I would like to say that things have changed and things have gotten better in society. But also, as a white woman, I have sat in a courtroom and witnessed blatant racism occur directly in front of me. So I think that it would be an injustice for me to say to you, my students, that things are better and this isn't happening. And I think we would all be blind and be fooling ourselves if we were to believe that racism and discrimination against maybe the poor is not real, because unfortunately it does still happen. Now, does it happen in every instance? Of course not. But is it still there? Yeah, it's still there. And is it still a problem in our society today? Yeah, it's still a problem in our society today. How do we fix it? If I knew that, man, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what would happen if I knew that. But we would be living in a much better country right now with a lot fewer problems. But complaints correlated positively to the percentage of minorities in the population. So if you live in an all-white town with all rich people, all rich white people, you're probably not going to have a lot of complaints about racism or what's the word I'm looking for? Discrimination. If you have a more diverse community, you're probably going to have more complaints about racism and discrimination. Kind of makes sense, right? Some reports indicate that lower class African Americans and Hispanics have a higher negative interactions with police. Residents, both black and white, are initially disrespectful to the police 3 times as often as police are initially respectful to residents. Read that one again. Residents, both black and white, are initially disrespectful to police 3 times as often as police are initially disrespectful to residents. That means that the person being contacted by police is disrespectful to the officer first, 3 times as often as the officer is disrespectful to the citizen first. Can you imagine why? How many of you have had negative contacts with law enforcement? And unfortunately, that one negative contact you had with a cop 15 years ago, or that your parents had with a cop 15 years ago and they taught you about, probably sticks with you. And even though the cop that you're dealing with today has nothing to do with that negative experience, you might bring that with you. So it's really important. It's hard to make a first impression twice. So the first impression you have of police, unfortunately, sticks with you, which is really a sad thing, unless it's a good experience. But okay, racial profiling occurs when an officer uses a profile to stop a driver and usually obtain consent to search a vehicle. I asked this question in class a lot, and I really wish we were in class and we could all talk about this. But I've had a lot of students say, yeah, I got pulled over for speeding, and then the officer asked me if he could search my car. And I'm like, what? You were speeding and the officer asked if he could search your car? Are you serious? And yeah, apparently this happens a lot. I would say, no, please don't search my car. But anyways, minorities are highly targeted based on the assumption that they are more likely to commit criminal acts. However, the Supreme Court has upheld a lot of these stops and basically said the use of race as a criterion to stop someone or in a profile has been allowed. So pretext stops have been upheld, and the law allows race to be considered as only one element in deciding to stop an individual. Now, you can't just stop a car because the driver is black. But you can stop a car if the driver is black and the registration is expired. Or, and the driver is speeding. So the Supreme Court has kind of gone along with a lot of the traffic stops. Okay, so moving on to police shootings of blacks. Black men are disproportionately the victims of police shootings. Blacks are disproportionately involved in violent crime. Blacks are disproportionately more likely to assault police officers. Police officers may perceive blacks as a greater threat. That's a lot to take in. Can you understand why it is difficult to be a black man in our society? And obviously, I'm a white woman, so I'm not trying to say that I can understand it, because clearly what kind of background do I have in understanding this? Zero. The victims of crime, and if I remember correctly, young black men are the most likely to be murdered in the United States, period. Whether it's by police or be murdered in general. So if you are a young black man, you are the most likely victim of homicide in the United States, period. Not having anything to do with police shootings. Obviously, that's with police shootings as well. So it's very dangerous to be a young black man in the United States. Interesting here. This was very surprising to me. I have a strange feeling that this is going to be changing based on the changes that are going to be made to policing in the United States. But no national statistics are known as to the number of people killed by police each year. I find that really interesting and odd, to be honest with you. I don't know why they wouldn't keep those kinds of statistics. The FBI reports show numbers increasing even while the crime rate has declined. Blacks are disproportionately shot and killed by police, and efforts are underway to obtain better statistics. That's really something that in my opinion, should have been done quite some time ago. And I'm going to skip over the 1994 Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act was passed, requiring the Attorney General to acquire data about the use of excessive force by law enforcement and publish yearly reports. Yeah, this was ordered and the law was passed in 1994, but the reports were never produced. Interesting. So, factors in the use of force. Excessive force occurs in less than 1% of all police interactions with the public. So, if you're thinking that everyday officers are going out shooting people, that's clearly not the deal. Use of force occurs in 1.3 to 2.5% of all encounters. And that might mean use of force like put your hands on someone just to get handcuffs on them and things like that. So we're not talking about shooting or killing people. 1.3 to 2.5% of all encounters. We're just talking about any physical force. Could be talking taser, baton, just hands-on, that kind of stuff. Okay. So in this 1980 study, it also talked about use of force by region in the United States, which I thought was pretty interesting. And they broke it down by region in the United States, and they said incidents per 100,000. Okay, in the South, incidents of police use of force were highest with 90 incidents per 100,000, followed by the Northeast, so New York-ish area, Boston, New York, that would be 72 per 100,000. The Midwest was 68 per 100,000. And us out here in the West, California area, 50 per 100,000. So the good thing is for us in California is that our numbers are quite a bit lower than other areas in the United States. Now, does that mean we're off the hook and we're doing so much better? No, but I do think that our training out here in California is we are a little bit better than other places throughout the United States. So that was at least a little bit of a glimmer of hope that we are doing things a little bit better in California. But this guy, Friedrich, in 1980 did a study about the use of force, talked about characteristics of the target or the victim. And he basically indicated that it was typically a male with a disrespectful demeanor, mental illness, intoxicated, either the presence with a weapon or the perception of that person having a weapon and that person having a violent criminal record. didn't really, the situational characteristic was kind of vague, but it talked about the officer involved being a young Hispanic male, typically, which is kind of interesting. Most likely being a young Hispanic male with post-traumatic stress disorder. So kind of interesting. But this is a study from 1980, so that was quite some time ago. So is it similar now? I really don't know. So anyways, tasers. You all have seen tasers and what they do. Police officers most police officers have tasers now. This is something that probation, my agency, we never got. We just didn't use tasers, which I'm kind of glad because it was just one more thing to carry around and learn how to use. I never used my gun, so that's good. Never used my pepper spray, which is interesting. I don't know if I've told this class that or not. I had walked around with my baton, gun, pepper spray, handcuffs, whatever on my duty belt for 20 years. I used the handcuffs a lot, I will admit that. But other than that, I never used my pepper spray, which I think was kind of weird. I think most probation officers at some point in their careers had to use at least a pepper spray. Never shot anybody, thank God. And I only used my baton to poke in laundry piles when we were doing searches to see if anybody was hiding in the laundry. But yeah, so I was very lucky. But we did not, that's just a side note that has nothing to do with this. But anyways, but tasers can be really useful. They also can be a disaster because if someone is either A, really high, or B, very mentally ill, sometimes tasers don't work. Or C, you're using a taser on someone so as not to kill them, and then they have like heart issues, and then you end up killing them anyway because of the electric shock, the energy shock that they get from the taser, then you end up killing them anyway. But anyways, so I know that's not funny, but they do result in fewer injuries, and it is less than lethal. So they are usually safe. They're safer than shooting, but a lot of times, and gosh, I saw this on something. I hate to. I'm not trying to get political here. It's going to sound kind of political though, so I'm sorry. There was an interview with President Biden where he was talking about a police officer who shot an unarmed man with a knife. Did you hear what I just said? A police officer who shot an unarmed man with a knife. A man with a knife is not unarmed. Right? Okay, so the mindset of a lot of people is that if you don't have a handgun pointed at a police officer, then they are not deadly. If someone is 10 feet away from you with a knife, that is an armed person. If someone is 20 feet away from you with a knife, that is an armed person. So anyways, it's very controversial. When you go through training as a police officer, you will see a lot of these scenarios where we see police officers draw their duty weapon and shoot and kill people. And you'll go, I understand now why he shot that guy. Whereas before, you might have looked at it and thought, wow, how come he didn't shoot him in the leg? How come he didn't? Yeah, and trust me, when you go through the training, you're going to understand that guy. If I tried to shoot him in the leg and I missed, I'm dead. Anyways, okay, police officer could be held liable, blah, blah, blah. Department policies. So we're going to go through that a little bit more here. In most use of force incidents, officers are not indicted or charged most of the time. Perception is that police shootings are increasing, but that's not necessarily true. We just see them more now because of social media. And officers may not be criminally charged, but they still might face discipline for violating policy. So that's where I was going with this. Your department policy, if you shoot somebody while you're at work, even if you didn't violate the law, you could have violated your department's policy and you might still end up getting fired. Anyways, so there's all kinds of interesting things that could happen. You could get sued, fired, or end up in prison for the rest of your life. So being a police officer is rough. Okay, where were we going this? Small set of law enforcement officials. Okay, they set up this whole police executive research forum guidelines. So they want officers to do some different things when they're using force. And those things include prohibiting firing into a moving car, using de-escalation strategies before resorting to force, abandoning the so-called 21 feet rule that advised shooting a suspect with a knife if he came within 21 feet of the perceived likelihood that the officer could be fatally injured. Okay, so what I was talking, and I'm going to pause there. What I was talking about, if a person has a knife and they're 21 feet from you, basically the concept is that he could run and get to you and stab you and kill you before you could get your weapon drawn, pointed, and shoot him. So that's what they're talking about. That's the 21 feet rule. And administering first aid immediately, even taking the shooting target to the hospital immediately without waiting for an ambulance. A lot of people think, and that's all for those, the guidelines that were listed in your book on page 162. A lot of people were really upset with some of the shootings that they saw on TV, videos, actual videos of shootings when they saw officers put handcuffs on the shooting victims. And that is normal policy. If you shoot someone who was going to shoot you, the policy typically for most agencies is that you need to handcuff that person because you don't know. I mean, they might be dead. You don't know. But if they're not dead and they have another gun somewhere, you know what I mean? I know it sounds really cold, but that's just what they do. Discretion in criminal investigations. So proactive investigations. This is trying to basically investigate things before they happen, attempts to document crime as it occurs, a more active police role, sometimes involves deception by police. That was part of our discussion question this week. Yes, I was somewhat sneaky, but I didn't arrest him, so give me a break, guys. Anyways, requires targeting based on reasonable suspicion, changes police role from discovering who has committed a crime to who might commit a crime. We also did talk about asset forfeiture. I told you about the police dog thing. Asset forfeiture, some people do think that asset forfeiture is unethical. Police dogs specifically, and I'm going to talk specifically about the drug detection dogs. Those dogs are very expensive. Number one, to buy. Number two, to maintain. And why are they not? It's not that expensive for a dog, but they train constantly. It's thousands and thousands of dollars to train those dogs and to keep them certified. So they use that money to train their dogs a lot of times. So use of informants. Can this be something that might cause a bit of a moral, ethical dilemma? Heck yeah, it could. So yeah, most of the time your informants or your snitches want money. They might, but there's other stuff that could happen. They could want revenge against someone. They could make stuff up in order to make themselves look better, to get revenge on someone else. And they also do operate under pretty kind of few restrictions from police. So these are things that could cause a problem, could become too intimate with informants, overestimate the veracity of their information. It could be duped. Informant could be entrapping people. They could be engaging in unethical or illegal behavior. The informant could get into the police officer's personal life, or the officer could intimidate or force the informant's cooperation. You should, if you ever want to watch a show that shows you a bunch of really shady, unethical stuff, watch Chicago PD. Shady, unethical stuff that would never happen in real life. I like to watch the show because it's entertaining, but wow. Undercover officers, another thing. Could this become a problem? Yeah, absolutely. Very difficult for officers and their families. Typically, a nice short-term thing would be great, non-intimate relationships, but if you've ever seen the movie Donnie Brasco, I think Johnny Depp is in this movie, where Donnie Brasco was that was his undercover name, but he was an FBI agent that went undercover in a mob family, and he brought down like an entire mob family. Chicago, maybe New York, I'm not really sure, but he was undercover for like 6 years. So really interesting. Really got into the family and stuff. Reactive investigations. You also have to think about, when we're talking about discrimination, police officers, if someone from the wrong side of the tracks calls the police to report something, how hard are the police gonna look or work on that case versus if the rich people from the Bluffs call the police? It's unfortunate but true, and that kind of discrimination is not acceptable, but it also happens. Interrogation. Yes, you can lie. Miranda warnings are required anytime a suspect is in custody or feels they are not free to leave and they are being questioned. Anytime they are in custody or feel they are not free to leave and they are being questioned. So can you manipulate them? To a certain extent, yes. Now, and lie to a certain extent, yes. Can you threaten them? No, you can't threaten them. Can you physically harm them? No, you can't physically harm them. The question that I told, or the discussion question, when I told the kid, I got you on tape smoking weed over there by the Valero, that's totally fine. If I told him, if you just tell me the truth, I'm not going to do anything to you. And he says, all right, fine, I was smoking weed. And I said, I knew it, I'm going to arrest you right now. That is not okay, because I told him that I wasn't going to arrest him. So I cannot use that kind of leverage against him. It's a different kind of lie, right? I coerced him by saying, you're not going to get in trouble, so just tell me the truth. So different kind of lie. So, interesting. And here's some discussion questions that you can think about. And I think that's it.